So I have had my Garmin Instinct 3 for a bit over 3 months now, and generally I think this is excellent watch. But I decided to make another follow-up review video after using this watch obviously for a few months. So when I got this watch, I was actually very impressed with this watch. So we actually get really decent build quality on this watch. Also it feels very nice on your wrist. The screen is very decent this year. Actually solar charging is fairly fast on this watch, and again it just feels like very solid watch. Also good GPS, decent heart rate tracking, and everything for most part is actually decent. But actually there are quite a lot of problems basically with this watch, which probably no one will actually disclose you. Probably those other guys that basically receive these watches for free to do these reviews, they probably will never tell you these things. So again, I purchased this watch myself and I do not have to stick with that stuff. So first, when it comes to the flashlights, basically the flashlight obviously is basically the biggest upgrade over the past Instinct 2 essentially on this watch. And when I got it, and basically I was very impressed with the flashlight. But recently I actually got a couple more cheaper Chinese watches with dedicated flashlights, and I realized just how pathetic basically the flashlight actually is on this watch. So first, when it comes to the runtime, as you see, basically on the maximum, it can last for roughly 2.5 hours basically on a full charge. So the runtime definitely isn't that good. So for example, if you actually compare runtime basically on other watches, so at this brightness, so if you check my channel, I have like at least 10 different these Chinese watches with dedicated flashlights, and at this brightness this watch has. On those other basically Chinese watch essentially which costs like $20, you can expect to get like 10 hours of runtime basically at almost the same brightness this watch has. But also there are some watches basically, for example this particular one costs like $15 essentially, and the flashlight is literally like 5 or 6 times brighter basically on this guy essentially. So again, Garmin's basically main selling point of this watch was this new flashlight really, but they have actually used some very old inefficient chip basically inside, which is neither like efficient nor like very bright as well. So also the spread isn't that good, so it's concentrated basically in one line kind, and it's not like very wide. So definitely if you use a flashlight indoors, it's still good. But if you actually need to use it outdoors to see in front of you, walk somewhere, or maybe do some trekking, then definitely the brightness of this flashlight isn't enough. So, and it's not really good. So I would say indoors very good. But again, if you actually get one of these Chinese watches, so this is a KT75 model. Also there is KT80 model, which is actually better than this one. So I'll make a video of that after a couple of weeks essentially. So again, the brightness of this when I measured is like 5 or 6 times bright, and also with better spread, and also it can reach much farther as well. So again, this $15 watch completely destroys this Garmin watch when it comes to the flashlight, and this watch again costs like 400 euros. That's what I paid for mine. So the flashlight, again, it's completely ridiculous that this was their main selling point, but they have included such like low-end chip basically, so which doesn't last very long nor is very bright. So basically the brightness maybe wouldn't be a problem if it also lasted just as good as it should be. So at this brightness, if you compare to other watches, it definitely should last at least 10 hours basically with the internal battery capacity it has. So again, the main selling point, yeah, it's definitely not good. Also, if we check the position of the flashlight, as you can see on this 25 times cheaper watch, essentially when you actually walk, it actually shines in front of you, and it's actually very good, so you can see very decently with this watch here. On the Garmin, as you can see, the flashlight location essentially is on the top, and basically when you actually wear it, basically it's basically shining sideways. So if you actually want to see in front of you, you actually have to twist your arm and hold it like this at all times to actually see in front of you, which isn't very ergonomic at all. And next, when it comes to the battery life, when you check the specs, this watch actually claims to have almost 1 month of battery life. I think 28 days in this 45mm version I have over here. But actually these claims are totally off. So what I'm actually seeing is, if you actually do not use a flashlight at all and do only very basic stuff with this watch and do not track any TTs whatsoever really, so the maximum I have ever gotten on this watch, basically also what it shows basically in these estimates, is around 17 days. So it's like almost 2 times less than actually the claimed specs. And again, I have no idea why it's so poor basically. Also, when I actually talked with other people, basically, if you compare the Instinct 3, the solar version versus AMOLED, so in the specs, the AMOLED claims to have like worse battery life than this one, but in real life, they are pretty much equal. So when I actually talked with other people who have these watches, so again, why the battery life isn't as good as it claims to be, yeah, no idea. By the way, when it comes to the GPS exercise, however, the GPS tracking, like battery life is spot on, so I can't complain about that, so that is accurate. But the actual like runtime, basically, what you can expect to get is only a bit over 2 weeks and not 1 month like they claim. But personally, since I actually use a flashlight quite a lot on these watches, I was pretty much charging this watch every 4 or 5 days. So again, I wasn't using it that much, but again, maybe like 10 to 20 minutes per day. So basically I had to charge this watch pretty much every 4 or 5 days. So again, do not believe those claims. And next, when it comes to solar charging, even though Garmin claims that the solar panel is like crazy improved over the past Instinct 2, I'm not really seeing that kind of like crazy difference that they claim. So they claim that this is like 4 or 3 times more efficient. You have to check those numbers yourself, what they claim. I do not remember them, but again, they claimed some absolutely wild numbers. So basically, if you actually placed in direct sunlight, if you have full sunlight, it does indeed actually charges up fairly fast, and definitely much faster than the previous Garmin Instinct 2 I had. But those like 4 or 5 times claims, I do not believe them, so it isn't that improved. And also when it comes to charging basically on its own, when you actually do not place it in sun, also, maybe if you live in one of the countries where you do not have much sun for like half the year, then I find the solar charging to be completely useless pretty much. So in like January, February, basically when I had this watch and there wasn't much sun outside, basically I was seeing pretty much like zero charge basically on the like solar panel. So even when I was wearing it outdoors. And also it doesn't recharge at all if you simply wear it indoors. Basically, maybe if you think it can recharge basically from indoor lights, then nope, this also can't really do that. So again, be aware of that. Also, if for example, obviously if you wear a jacket, then probably the biggest problem is your jacket usually goes over the watch, and when you are actually outside it doesn't charge. So not a fault of the watch, but again, this is something you need to know if you basically live in a country where it's cold and not much sun for like half the year and you wear also a jacket. So for those months the solar charging will be completely useless. Again, even like if you have like bright basically lights indoors, this still doesn't recharge at all, basically, from my experience. And also, if you're wondering if the Garmin Instinct 3 finally has decent step counter, then nope, I actually have some bad news. Even though the step counter definitely is much better than on the past Instinct 2, on the Instinct 2 the step counter pretty much was useless and it undercounted, basically in my experience, by up to 30 to 40%. So it was complete garbage. This one, basically if you simply walk a long distance, it tracks your steps perfectly fine and there isn't any problem, and it's pretty much the same as like Apple Watch or Samsung or Huawei. But again, basically Garmin's have huge problem where they simply like undercount heavily steps when you simply do them in short bursts. Basically when you simply walk around your house, do some household chores, then they undercount like crazy. So basically if you wear, for example, Samsung Galaxy Watch or Apple Watch, basically on the same wrist for same day, and this Instinct watch, then at the end of the day essentially your Samsung will probably give you like extra 20% steps more, and Samsung generally is probably one of the best step counters when it comes to that. So again, when it comes to long distance walking, they're the same, but again when you simply walk around the house, So in short bursts, again, this still undercounts. It's not as bad as the past Garmin Instinct 2, which was completely terrible, but again, still it's not as good as competition. So still it's actually usable for step counting, so I can't blame it for that. You can still get idea how basically you are active throughout the day, looking only at step count, but again, this is something again you have to know. Basically, if you compare to competition, again, it's still not as good. Also, compared to the past Instinct 2, we actually get upgraded navigation system. So first in the trackback, and basically if you want to see where you are, you kind of also see your city names, so nearby cities. So even though this watch doesn't have full-blown maps, you can kind of see your nearby cities, basically, if you basically see the map. However, there are two huge problems. First, the city names are often spelled completely wrong, and if you aren't familiar basically with the area, basically sometimes you even can't understand what are those cities because they're spelled like completely wrong, so I have no idea where they have actually gotten their data from. And then the next even bigger problem is actually the location on the map often actually doesn't correspond to the city, basically. So oftentimes it's even off by like 5 to 10 kilometers. So again, you can't even trust this data. So what the hell is going on? So this map data they have actually put in this watch is completely off. So, and you can't really trust it at all. Also, another thing that is completely off on this watch is actually the weather data. For example, if you rely on your watch to tell your weather, really, then again, this is usually off by up to like 3 or 4 degrees. So I have no idea where they take their like weather information from, but again, this data source that they're using isn't accurate, and it usually doesn't match actually the actual weather conditions. Again, it's off by usually like 3 degrees, so the temperatures. And also if you compare it with other like weather like sources like Google weather or stuff like that, again, on those it's accurate, but on this one it's completely like different. So I have no idea why it's like that. By the way, this is not only a problem with this Instinct 3. I have seen this same problem with pretty much every Garmin watch, so they really should get a better like data source for their weather information. Also, compared to the past Instinct 2, this Instinct 3 also gets this nap detection. So if you care about this stuff, this has it. But actually, basically, when I have actually worn this watch and actually, yeah, basically went for a nap, this watch has never detected that I have actually fallen asleep and taken a nap. So I do not know what is going on, because on other watches, I think the Bioactive 5 I had, basically, on that watch actually this function worked, but on this one, basically, it has never detected any nap that I have taken. So I can't comment basically on the sleep tracking accuracy, as I do not really care about the stuff much. I do not track that. But again, when it comes to naps, if you care about the stuff, this watch has never tracked any naps that I have taken, so that's kind of weird. Also, obviously, this watch, even though it has some kind of music control, so you can control basically the music that plays on your phone, essentially, this actually doesn't have internal storage, so you can't upload music. And also, obviously, this watch also doesn't have like a speaker or microphone, so you can't answer calls and stuff like that. So I think at this price, it's completely ridiculous that we actually do not get basically at least the internal storage where you could store music. And yeah, also it's completely ridiculous that they actually do not include the speakers and microphones in this watch as well, and only reserve it for the Phoenix, because again, this stuff doesn't really cost much to implement, because for example, this literally like $15 Chinese watch actually has got a speaker, microphone, I can take my calls, and I can even like listen to music basically on this watch as well. So yeah, basically, Garmin, please stop lying that this stuff costs like so much to implement, because watches at much cheaper price all have it. So essentially, and again, at this price, basically all other basically competitor watches again has speaker and microphone, so you can easily answer calls if you need the stuff. Personally, I use this feature a lot, so basically also that is why I actually have switched to that watch basically over this one. So again, it's heavily limited when it comes to features, just to basically get you to spend more and get the Phoenix, I guess. Also, if you actually didn't knew, then yep, this Instinct 3 actually doesn't have the latest heart rate sensor inside like the Phoenix line. For example, on the past Instinct 2, when that was released, basically that watch actually received the same sensor and everything the same, but they're skimping basically on this watch for no real reason. I guess only to get you to spend more and get the Phoenix if you need the stuff. But again, basically for exercise tracking still I think the sensor is absolutely great, so I can't complain. But still, yeah, they're really being quite pathetic when it comes to like limiting these features for no real reason other than that basically to get you to spend more on their other watches, which I think is completely ridiculous. By the way, if you are a new user on Garmin and haven't had any other Garmin watches in past, then you also need to know that to actually get all these health tracking features to work, such as body battery, HRV, recovery stuff, you actually need to wear your watch 24/7, essentially while you sleep as well. If you do not, you pretty much lose any real value from like 90% of these things. So again, you kind of have to wear your watch at night, and personally I do not actually wear it, so I'm missing out on all of those stuff essentially. So again, this is simply what you need to know. If you are existing user, you probably already know. By the way, this HRV status, even though they actually record it during daytime, they actually do not display it. For example, my Ultrahuman ring and other smart rings and even Apple Watch, you can actually get your daytime HRV on those as well, so you kind of do not even need to wear them at night to get this stuff. But on this one, they're simply limiting this stuff for no real reason. And overall, is this watch actually any good, and should you maybe get one? Well, just like I said at the start of the video, yep, I can still highly suggest this watch. So this video again only covered negatives that I have found after actually using this watch for almost 3 months essentially. Again, if you want to actually check basically the actual review, you can also check my other videos. So basically, again, do not take this video that I'm simply basically saying everything is bad about this watch, because that's not the case. Maybe in this video I covered maybe like 5% basically of all things. So the rest 95% things are absolutely great about this watch. So if you actually look at the total package, this watch I think is even much better than other like Garmin watch. For example, like a couple of weeks ago I also had the Garmin Vivo Active 6, and that watch had absolutely pathetic build quality, also was laggy, but this actually has got great build quality, it's not laggy. And again, also basically if you also compare the Phoenix line, those watches are crazy overpriced, but this one, of course, still this is also kind of a bit overpriced, but still not as bad as on those, and you kind of get the same like features as on those. So I think out of all Garmin watches, I think this is probably the best watch you can get. So again, we get absolutely great build quality, also GPS is very fast on this watch as well, and also generally very reliable. So in these months I have had it, basically it has never crashed or hanged on me. The Vivo Active 6, which I had recently, was hanging up basically several times for me already. Also, like the looks on this watch also are very decent, very comfortable. Display quality, this memory pixel display, yeah, it's absolute joy to use. And again, it's actually true always on display. Also in the shop I have also checked out the AMOLED version of this watch, and definitely this memory pixel is much better, like basically watch if you actually get one. Also really decent buttons on this watch as well. But yeah, personally I have had my fun with this watch, and actually I'll be selling and actually will be actually using this Chinese watch, so that I literally purchased for like $15, because actually the main like usage for this watch actually is a flashlight on this watch, so I mainly actually purchased it for that. But again, this literally like 25 times like cheaper watch actually has better flashlight, so I'm actually keeping this watch. And also when it comes to Stepcounter, it does pretty much the same job, so it has like timer, stopwatch and everything pretty much what I use. So I do not care as much about the health tracking stuff. I simply wear these watches for basically as a multi-tool, essentially for the flashlight, timer, stopwatch, time, date and stuff like that. So I do not care much about this like health tracking apart from Stepcounter, which kind of gives me an idea how active I am throughout the day. So I sometimes track some activities, but again, not my main priority. So if you are like me and you also need like a watch with actually like really decent flashlight, then maybe again like look at even one of these like much cheaper watches. The flashlight again At first I thought it's cool, but again when I actually like tried different watches which also have flashlight, then I just realized how like kind of pathetic it is. And again, it was like the main selling point of this watch and why I even purchased it. So again, I do wish in the Instinct 4 and the newer watches that they release, they will actually like include like decent LED chips in these flashlights and actually make them competitive. Anyway, yeah, still absolutely great watch. If you do not care as much about the flashlight as I do, then I can highly recommend this watch. And for sports tracking, recovery, sleep tracking, I think you can't really beat it. So absolutely awesome watch with absolutely great like display and build quality. Anyway, good luck.